Yeah, it's a good deal. Jason, things are good? Okay. Yeah.
I like change.
You know, in certain places in the Middle East and certain places in the Inuit, the Eskimo country, sometimes the sandstorm or the snowstorm is really, really heavy, that you can't even see an inch ahead of you. And so what anthropologists did some years ago, a group went to the Middle East, another group went to, the Eskimo country, and they said, we wonder how these people function when they can't see too far ahead. Here in America, when there is traffic, you just go nuts. When life gets a little confusing, you go nuts. When you suffer from depression, and depression is this place where it's all dark. You can't see much. There's no hope, right? And so what they realize, especially for the Eskimos, is that once the snow hits and it's blinding, they just sit on the snow. They don't move for hours, sometimes for a couple of days. And what they realize is that these people don't experience frustration, anxiety, fear, nervousness of anything. And they said, you know what, if you live in a culture that trains you, that life is just tough and it's always going to be chaotic, some of the emotions that, for example, exist in America just don't exist in them. And I think it's helpful for people, in a culture such as this, where everybody feels entitled and life is always about having fun and no harm should ever come to you. Whenever there's a hiccup in life, you're just devastated. If on the other hand, you come from certain parts of Africa or India, that devastation is just part of life. You're just born with it.
Yeah. I was born in the city of Detroit, abandoned as a child. At 14 years old.
Yeah.
That's why seeing and navigating what you're saying. Sometimes you're just born in chaos and it's a lot easier. Right? Someone coming out from chaos.
It's true. Yeah.
You ever go back home?
Everybody's dead. Grandparents dead, aunts, uncles dead. And the new generation, I don't know. And if I don't know them, I don't care for them that much. So no. Yeah. It's a funny thing, The people who are there want to come here. People who are here don't feel as if this is their home. It's a very strange, it's like, going to the bathroom. Those who are in it want to come out. Those who are out want to go in. It's like, like marriage. Those who are in it want divorce. Those who are single want to get married. Just one of those ridiculous things in life. Matters very little where you are, how you are. There's just always something.
Why is that? It's just like I was thinking the other day, and I was like, because I was talking to one of my daughters, and I was like, it's like people who are old want to be young, and people who are young want to be so bad.
Yeah.
Why do y'all want to grow up so fast? And I'm trying to tell you, because we're cool.
Yeah, Jason, I look at you, all I see is coolness.
I just don't understand it. If I could just be a kid, I'd be a kid.
Still wearing a baseball hat.
Well, that reminds me of a very, very interesting story. If you had the chance to go back to being like 15,
Right.
with the knowledge you have now, would you do it? Wait a minute, hold on, it's a little too quick.
I would.
Look, with the knowledge you have now, it's one thing to go back being 15 and being innocent and naive and saying, you know what, I'm just going to live my life. With the knowledge you have now, which means the following: you're like a 40-year-old man, which means that inside you, you're aware of certain things, right?
Yeah.
So if you go back in time, you have to carry the burden, this cross of knowledge that you have at this stage in your life.
Okay.
Which means that you're going to hang out with a lot of 15-year-olds. Are they going to be fun for you? The answer is no. You're going to have a lot of instructors telling you how this and that is. Is that going to be fun for you? The answer is no. And you realize sometimes being naive, being ignorant, which is what kids have, naivete, they can actually flow through life much more smoother than adults, because it's like, going out on your first date than you being there having done that. You realize that ultimately all people that sin, they just suck. They just come in different bodies. Yeah.
Yeah. See, like when you first ask, I guess when you first ask it.
It sounds interesting.
It sounds interesting,
Yeah.
but when you put it that way,
It's like, it's like going to Berkeley sounds really, really good, but reading, 10 books for each class, that sounds terrifying.
Oh, wow.
Consider, you're a dad of what, 3, 4, 5, 10? Yeah, whatever. So initially when you got the news, Xanthony, you're going to be a father, just guessing, you jumped up in joy. It's going to be great. And then they come out. All the sleepless nights, all the money you wasted, all the screaming and shouting disappointment.
Still.
And then you get this like 18-year-old punk in your class. I'm going to be a dad. I'm so excited. You should say, what a dumb piece of shit.
No. That is so true.
This is a small class, I guess. What time is it, Abraham?
It is 11:04.
Oh, all right. Well, what do you guys want to talk about today? Let's do something fun. And then Thanksgiving is coming upon us. Not it does. It makes much of a difference for us, but nevertheless. So, do you have any questions, any comments? Ava? Yeah, in general. Of course. Abraham, how about you?
I wanted to ask this last week, but I got locked into my house because I forgot I didn't have the gate keys, so I couldn't come to class. So I want to ask about the wisdom of the Vedas. Like, do you think that like having individual like deities for like different aspects of life can let people understand themselves or what they're going through better versus like people, like let's just say for example somebody says I'm feeling depressed, but like if you break that down into like smaller compartments, would that help people really understand why they're feeling depressed?
Hello.
Hi. How are you?
How are you?
Good.
I'm sorry, say again.
It's like with the wisdom of the Vedas, just like having different like deities for different things in the world. Like let's just say like somebody says I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling depressed, but like if people say that's just like one big emotion, but if you break it down into like smaller things, I'm feeling guilt, I'm feeling shame, I'm feeling all of these things. Maybe that's why I'm feeling depressed. Do you think that would like allow people to understand themselves and what they feel better?
So let me see if I get this right. And forgive me if I go wrong about this. Hello. So I'm your dad. I'm a crappy father. I'm 50. You're my son. You're 20. And because of the way I have treated you, been abusive for the past like many, many years, you're just sad and depressed and lonely and miserable, right? And so what you do is you take a very holistic approach, which is you just categorize me as the prime suspect. I am the evil in your life. And that's it, okay? And your question is, what if you were to kind of chop this experience, you as a human being, me as a human being, this human being being your father, chop into tiny little pieces so you can understand the kind of formation of a depression, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I was to tell you that I, as your father, had a father who was equally abusive, would that help you understand why I was the way with you a bit more?
Yeah, I feel like in my case, I feel like, well, I can understand why you have these traits, and it's kind of like how you mentioned in the videos, with the videos that you share, like how can you change that, like in the future, like what can you do?
Well, here's the thing. Understanding falls into two very, very different categories. One is intellectual, one is emotional, and one is the application. You intellectually understand that the reason why I've been abusive is because when I was a kid myself, my father belted me, slapped me, kicked me. My own mother was never around to protect me. So from a very young age, even though my physical parents were there, I felt emotionally orphaned. Okay? And the only way I knew how to cope with my miserable life was to just exhibit a good amount of anger. And should I find myself in an environment where I could express myself physically, I would do so in fighting, whatever the case may be. I go out somewhere, I find a woman, I'm attracted to her, I camouflage this beautiful presence, she gets trapped into it, we have sex, you come out. I don't understand the difficulties, the complexities of life. You come out initially very happy, but I'm not a very resourceful father. I have no job, no education. I'm just very unstable. And the only way I can cope with the frustration that you create in my life is by beating you up. Okay? I explain all this stuff to you, and you understand it intellectually. Okay? But your hatred for me emotionally still exists, which means the following. Just because you understand something with your head, it doesn't mean you're able to understand with your heart or with your emotions. Okay? Sometimes you do understand with your head, sometimes you do understand with your emotions. The next step is for you to apply. Every time you see me, okay, organically certain emotions want to come out and express themselves. But you need to have the mindfulness and the awareness to stop them from coming out. That's a very, very different story. So remember, always cut yourself in 3 different areas. There's a part of you, Abraham, that's intellectual. You desire to understand. Okay? It's like, before you guys came in, he wants to go to Berkeley. I tell him, listen, sociology is a wonderful field of study. The only problem with Berkeley is that every class is about 5 or 6 books. And each book is about 300 pages. And each book requires an essay that's 50 pages. Do you think at this age you're able to do this? Intellectually, going to Berkeley sounds great. Emotionally, you say, well, listen, I got like 5 kids. I work 2 jobs. I'm like a 40-year-old man. I don't have time for all that stuff. I can do maybe 5 pages the entire semester, but not 50,000 pages. That doesn't work. Now, the problem is fantasies come in. And when fantasy comes in, you overlook your own capacity. And the only way that sinks in is for him to go to Berkeley, get accepted, get excited because you get the letter. Welcome to UC Berkeley. And the moment that the excitement happens, he's going to forget the fact that he's a 40-year-old man. And when you get to be 40, you're no longer 20. Your brain is not as elastic as you think it to be. You're closed off in so many different ways. So, just because you understand it doesn't mean anything. Some people learn by having some information from books. And then some people are able to kind of correct the information they have by speaking them. But the ultimate test is when you put them on paper, when you put them in practical life. It's like, you've read some books about overcoming, a bad relationship. You heal for a few days or a few months, then you go back into the dating scene. And then you realize you're repeating the same mistake. You have information, but it hasn't yet morphed into practicality. And that's the problem with the Vedas. That's the problem with everything in life. That learning, is layered. Just because you learn how to read, it doesn't mean you understand. Just because you understand, it doesn't mean you can feel. Just because you feel, it doesn't mean you can apply. Does that? No? I don't know. Whatever. Ava, yeah.
When you think about usefulness,
Can you explain that?
like we have no decisions because we didn't choose to be born, we didn't choose the conditions. So everything we experience is
If this was a math class, what sort of a question would you ask? Would it be determinism? I mean, if this was like a calculus class, would you raise your hand and say, Professor, can we talk about determinism? But you ask it in this class, why?
it's like a question.
I'm sorry? Yeah, because philosophy and religion allows for such questions to come up. You know, so what you could say is, because of this class, certain thoughts and certain emotions and certain curiosities are born. Those are the causes, okay? And those causes impact you. And then there's another factor, which is your temperament. Are you shy? Are you reserved? Or do you have the courage to kind of raise your hand and say, you know what, I would like to ask this question in class. And you realize even your temperament is predetermined, that it allows you to be a bit more comfortable in raising your hand. And even if you were to fumble your question, that you would speak it, but the words are not quite accurate, so you have to try a few times. But there is another part here which says, you know what, I'm not going to be condemned. I'm not going to allow people to condemn me, or I'm not going to feel condemned by the gaze of other people. I don't care what they think of me, how they judge me. You know what, this question is interesting for me, I'm going to ask it. And you're going to fumble over and over and over again until the question comes out right. Now, I think the more interesting part of your question, which you didn't ask, could be the following. Now, I'm just going to put some words in your mouth, even though you didn't ask it. And forgive my analogy, but this is the way my brain works. If it offends you, my apologies. If it doesn't, good for you. You have some maturity to you. Imagine I like you. And I don't know how to capture your attention, how to capture your interest, how to capture your affection. I'm going to invite you to my house for some coffee and some food. I'm going to say, if my house was to be messy, cluttered, what sort of an impact would that have on her psychology, on her emotions? Would that be a cause for more attraction or less attraction? Would she be repulsed by me, or would she gravitate towards me? And in my head, I would say, you know what? Walking into a home that's smelly, that's dirty, is repulsive. So I'm going to clean the house. And what you realize is something very, very interesting. I become a very interesting political animal. I make sure I create a physical environment that impacts you on an emotional and psychological level. So you come to myself, this is really, really clean, and the food smells really, really good. And then when the sun sets, I'm going to light some candles. And I do all of this stuff for one simple reason. I'm going to, through physical means, I'm going to create a psychological environment for you. Where my beard right now is gray, in darkness, it's not going to be as gray. When it's light, you're going to see a lot of wrinkles. When it's a little dimmer, you're not going to see as many wrinkles. My voice in daytime is going to be coarse, aggressive. It's going to like bother your ears. But with the candles lit, with some flowers, with some food, my voice is going to be much softer. So, Eva, what would you like to eat tonight? And you realize what I'm doing is I'm determining the sort of tools I need to create certain psychological causes, impacts. And so even though you had mentioned you have to leave my house at 8 o'clock, it's 8:30, then 9, then 10, then 11, then you say, Amir, do you mind if I sleep on the sofa? I say, no, please, go ahead. And I think when you have some experiences, again, going back to his question about going to Berkeley, my experience damaged him. He was all about Berkeley. I, sprinkle a little doubt here, a little reality there, and all of a sudden he's thinking about CSU Northridge, East Bay. Now he's got more perspectives. That's what you cause with experience. And your task as a young adult is ultimately to have enough power to create the right causes in your life. Does that? That doesn't do anything for you?
I mean, a little bit.
That's all I got. Yeah.
Over the past weeks of this class, you tend to kind of wrap everything back around to like relationships and
Right.
sex.
No, okay, fine. Yeah.
I mean,
No, it's true. Fine.
I'm not judging it.
Of course you are, but that's okay.
If you think about humans as animals, right? Animals have one purpose on the planet, which is to recreate.
Right.
And so therefore it makes sense. Would you say that that's humans are just more complex animals put on this planet to find a mate and then have children, and we just tend to have bigger brains and therefore have more emotions that go along with that?
Your question is so interesting. Not really, but it is. Number one, let me go back to this guy. There are days I like him, there are many days I don't like him, T.S. Eliot. If I was an orange, I would simply be an orange. If I was a cat, I would simply be a cat. Most of the, if not all the animals you see down here, they're able to walk and talk and move around after a couple of days. And I'm being very generous. Most of them are able to do all those things after a couple of minutes. If you examine human beings, first, we don't accept life the way it is. I don't accept my looks. I don't accept my weight. I don't accept politics, society. I accept nothing in life because nothing goes according to the things that I dream of. I'm a creature for some strange reason condemned to pursue beauty. I don't even know why. Go to any party. There's a good-looking man and an unattractive man. Your eyes organically desires the man who looks better. You're condemned. You see a 1-bedroom, you see a 10-bedroom. Organically desire a place that's more spacious. Animals function through instincts. Instincts. I mean, you go to these fancy restaurants, right? And you order a Caesar salad. They bring you two lettuce leaves. Put some shit around it, and they charge you $30. It makes no fucking sense. We are in a position in life that is chaotic. Nothing about life for us makes sense. So we have no choice but to create meaning. That's number one. So everything that we do out there is for one simple reason. Power, because we feel incompetent and we feel poor, intellectually, physically, emotionally. Okay? We also have a hierarchy. In other words, if you live in communities, there are do's and don'ts, rights and wrongs. Now, your parents have injected inside you a software. You go to school, you don't do this, you don't do that, you do this and you do that. The very nature of the fact that you and I have parents have the power to create shame and guilt and morality, i.e. right and wrong inside you. The moment you cross a line, you will feel guilty and shame. You can't opt out of any of those things. Add to it, God forbid, if Kim Kardashian happens to be your hero. Every time you look at Kim Kardashian and then you look yourself in the mirror, and we have this tendency of comparing and contrasting. Do I look like her? Why am I not looking like her? Okay. Anytime there is something or someone you worship, whether it's Jesus Christ or Hugh Hefner, it matters very little. If you have a standard, if you don't reach that, you feel bad about yourself. Most animals under the sun don't feel that way. You have one alpha male. You don't have a pack that resents the alpha male. They simply follow without question. We are not like that. We have jealousy in ways that animals don't. We have emotions in ways that animals don't. We create rituals Not because we know what they are, but because we are scared. Elephants have this mourning ritual. They experience grief, but for them it's organic. For us, it's manufactured. If you go to the Eskimo country, mothers have to nurse their kids anywhere from 4 to 6 years. Sometimes they have to travel, and it's too tough, and they leave their kids in the snow to die. They don't feel bad, and they're not cuffed by ICE or police. No judge, no God who judges them. If you have elderly parents who have difficulty walking, you leave them in snow to die. So the point I'm trying to make is that we come down being meaningless, and oftentimes we leave life feeling meaningless. Now there is another part to us. And I borrow this from Charles Darwin. Do you know why it's so difficult to overcome depression? Because depression is a living organism. And you know what the function of every living organism is? To survive. I don't know why I am living. I don't even know if my pursuits, the meanings I've created, are in fact valuable. But the idea of imagining my own end, my death, is frightening. And yet I desire to live. And you know why? Not because I'm a saint, not because I'm a good instructor, simply because my organism does not desire to diminish. All living organisms will do whatever they possibly can to continue their existence. There is no power greater inside us than the power of sex. And we don't do it because we love. It's blind. It really is blind. You know, next time you fall in love with someone, ask yourself why. What qualities have you discovered in your companion that deserves your love? And I guarantee you, you won't be able to find it. Especially if you're in love with a 20-year-old. 20-year-olds don't have anything. The point I'm trying to make, ultimately everything in life is about relationships. And for any relationships to bind, mesh together, you need sex. And let me just give you a different definition of sex. I desire this. Inside it is T. When desire, physicality, and application come together, what you're having is a connection. My lip is touching this cup. My tongue tastes the tea. That is sex. And my desire is not satisfied. Once satisfied, I will put it down here, the way a man trashes you, or the way a woman trashes me. There is no difference. Yeah.
So I've been with my boyfriend for 4 years, right? For all of high school. And I would say that I'm with him because when we're together, it makes me use my brain more. We have like interesting conversations that therefore stretch my knowledge, and I find that satisfying. So does he.
Okay.
And that attracts me to him. Does
Okay.
that mean that? Then would you say that that has meaning?
No. It has meaning
What's
for you.
meaning?
It has meaning for you at this stage in your life. There comes a point where you're no longer going to be 18. You're going to have been graduated from school. You want perhaps a bit more stability in your life. You want commitment. It's what we call in the Greek world, what you want is pragma. Right now, you're in the stage of ludos and eros. Ludos is this element of lust. Lust for knowledge and lust for this and lust for that. And eventually they take a physical shape, which is called eros. You sit and read a book, you touch the paper, you turn the pages, you have a conversation. It's wonderful. But at the root of all of this, we call it non-committal. You're not going to commit to this man for the rest of your life, and neither he is to you, except moments of fantasy. Granted, all of us have them. There comes a point where you realize that particular phase in your life is over. You want something different. You want a 2-bedroom. You want a house. You want money. You want children. And your body at a certain point will, it's not even up to you. Talk about predeterminism. It's not even up to you. At a certain point, a woman's body says, listen, I am made for this. I want this. Now, you may have railed against wanting children for the past 1,000 years, but age 27, 28 comes about, or maybe 32, all of a sudden says, I have no idea why, but I really want kids. I hate kids, but I really, really want them, And then you realize, well, having wonderful conversation that stretches your imagination is no longer sufficient. What you need is money for a goddamn private school, for diapers, for formula. And I don't give a shit if you're sitting next to Jesus Christ. Does he have a job? And it's not enough. It's not enough to have conversation. And all of a sudden you realize, may I? This is Alexis. I have known her for about 10 years. Inside her is growing a life. She has a relationship with that thing inside her that her husband does not have. What her husband doesn't yet understand is the following. The moment that child comes out, he will be secondary. If he comes home and says, where's my lunch? This is your lunch. She's not going to care. The most important thing in her life is going to be that child. They're not going to sit and talk Plato. She won't care who Jesus Christ is. Her first question is, do you have a job? Do you have money to move? I don't want this kid to be in harm's way. And the point I'm trying to make, ultimately, is there comes a point in her life where her child will be very much like us. You move away from your parents, you have your own life, and you know what will be remaining for you? Old age and sickness. Your child is not going to come back home to take you to Kaiser. You got to do it on your own. Now you're in a different phase of life. The point I'm trying to make ultimately is the following. Every different stage in life demands different things from you. And for you to satisfy those demands, you need resources. At this stage in your life, you're trying to figure things out. It's wonderful to have a young man next to you, where you guys can sit and have conversations as opposed to drinking and smoking and just being stupid. Good for you. You have the privilege of finding a companion for yourself at this stage in your life to fulfill certain parts of you. Then you're going to be 19, you're going to take school a bit more seriously. Your boyfriend is not going to understand that because now you're going to spend 10 hours of your life with books and 30 minutes with him. Is he going to be jealous? Absolutely. Is he going to somehow try to sabotage your stay in school? Definitely. It's going to happen to all of us. Because your boyfriend will desire your attention and you're giving your attention to books. Your exam will be much more important for you than your boyfriend's happiness. Now, you have no idea what that envy and jealousy is going to do. He's going to be angry. How that's going to play out, you have no idea just yet. Then you're going to graduate. Okay? Then you're going to be finding yourself in a cubicle hanging out with some men. Does he like that? You have no idea. Are you going to make more money than him? You have no idea how that's going to impact him. Okay? The point I'm trying to make, again, at different stages, different needs. Right now, this is working for you. Good for you. 2 years' time, probably won't. Okay.
Well,
What's your name?
Veronica.
Veronica.
So we keep saying basically sex and relations and things like that. People are attracted like gateways to certain levels of, understanding. So I guess my question is people who practice abstinence, how do they reach this level of understanding?
Oh, they don't. They're stupid. Veronica, you said? There is something funny about us, and that's the following. First, you are gripped, held hostage by someone's physical beauty. Do you know how much work I gotta do to come to you and ask you to go out for a cup of coffee? And then how much work I gotta do to ask you out for dinner? And then how much work I gotta do to make you comfortable enough for you to trust me enough to say, come over the house for dinner? And do you know how much work it's gonna take me to have you stay the night? Now, that's not knowing anything about your history. I'm just simply being guided by my 5 senses: eyes, nose, ears, touch, and taste. That's all. All I know is that I look at you and I like you. And I want more of the thing that I like. Then you and I spend a lot of time together. You know, hanging out at coffee shops, holding hands, going hiking, having sex, all those things. At a certain point, I realized that my senses are not enough. I need to understand who you're on the inside. Now your history comes up. And one of the things about that scenario is that first, I become attached to you, not even knowing who the hell you are. And then I get to know you, realize I don't like you, or even get to know you, realize I like you, but I'm bored of you, but it's too late, I am attached. I want out, but I feel guilty. And that's the funny thing about human beings. We love people without knowing them. When you know them, you realize you don't like them as much, but you can't leave even though you want to. Now imagine if it was the other way around. Before me liking your physicality, your physical body and your physical life, let me see if I can like your emotions. But your emotions are historical. But for me to like your history, I gotta abstain from having sex with you. I gotta abstain from my emotions trapping me by saying, oh, she looks great. I gotta overcome all of that only to be interested in your history. And then ask myself, will that history work for me? I am Persian. She's American. I am 60. She's 20. She comes from a great background. I come from a fucked up background. Will that work? And the truth is, upon reflection, you come to realize it's not going to work. And when something doesn't work, you don't want to have sex with them. You don't want to hang out with them. You don't want to spend money with them. And if you do that, then the human race would just disappear. And that's the trick that universe plays with us human beings. You get to like someone physically, and the strange thing is time. Time seeps in. You know, I used to work at this car wash for about 25 years, and we used to buff cars. And sometimes cars would come, and this beautiful, glossy red paint at one point in its life comes to it's all like gray. So you get a high-speed buffer and a special wax, and you buff the oxidation out, and it comes back glossy. 2 weeks later, it goes back to being oxidized again. It's all crappy looking. If you were to abstain from becoming emotionally entrapped by other people, there's a good chance you would never like them. Because you have to keep out the sexual passion, keep out becoming an emotional junkie, simply because you now desire to get to know them. And the truth is, the moment you get to know anything too much, you won't like them. I was going to say about time. Time has another factor, which is time. It sucks out all the fun out of things. I don't know if you've seen Wicked 2 yet. Have you?
No, not okay.
Have you seen Wicked 1? How many times?
Maybe 3.
Go watch it another 10 times. And you'll begin to puke. And that's a relationship. And the only reason we don't really puke in like romantic relationships is because we have a tendency, and this is really good for us, there is so much distraction in our life. And when you have a lot of distraction, it doesn't allow you to sit and focus and examine and reflect. And that could be devastating if you were to sit back and examine and reflect. So you should be very thankful that you don't focus too much on your companion. one of the, I think, awful elements of religious traditions is that they invite us to look at the interior of things and not being sucked into the physical aspect of it. If I want to like you, Veronica, I need to make sure that the kingdom of God lives inside you, which means that I have to overcome the fact that you're attractive, all these fantasies about getting together, holding hands, having sex, having conversations, none of those things need to be interesting. You know how long it's going to take me to get to know that part of you before engaging in the physical aspect? So, Evan, anything?
It's not very related.
It's okay, doesn't matter. Go ahead.
I was just curious how you would define spirituality.
There are moments of discontent that all of us in this class have, you know, in the sense that you're just unhappy. You have money, it's not enough. You have a companion, it's not enough. You have a couple of degrees, it's not enough. You have a big house, it's not enough. You have great parents, it's not enough. We have all of those things where you wake up, you just happen to be in a funny mood and you feel as if you're yearning, longing, you're hungry for something. You don't really know what it is, okay? Now, these are just particular moods you fall into. And then after a few weeks or a few minutes, it's usually a few minutes, you just come out of it and you just go back to being normal, okay? There are two parts to you. There is a physical part, there is a spiritual part. Forget the spiritual for a moment. If I was to put this man on the board, his name is Abraham Maslow. Maslow is an American psychologist. He had this profound hatred towards his mother. He just argued that whenever I think about my mom, when I look at my mom, she brings out all the evils of life. So when she passed away, he didn't even go to her funeral. That's how much he hated her. And the other thing you need to know about this particular story is the following. You can be the best psychologist and psychotherapist. If there is a hatred inside you towards someone, you're never going to get rid of it, regardless of how much information and knowledge you may have. So for those of you in this class who are reading books to overcome trauma, for those of you in this class who are reading books to overcome a bad relationship, it's not going to work. Okay? Reading by itself is not going to work. It's going to take like 20 years. Now, before we get to the spiritual part, there are a couple of important things that you need to have. If I was to ask you, for example, how do you build a house? You say, well, you make sure that the ground is flat. Okay? And if you're doing on top of a hill, for example, you got to make sure that you have pillars that are sitting on rocks or solid rocks. Okay? You don't want to build your house on the sand. So before you become spiritual, there are certain things that you need to do and certain things you need to have as a human being. First, food, shelter, and clothing. An empty stomach is not going to take you very far. Now, for you to have food, shelter, clothing in a very healthy way, you need to make sure your body is healthy enough where you can process, digest food the right way. If you don't have food, if, for example, you come to this class and you say, you know what, I love these ideas. The only problem is I don't have a home. Well, these ideas are not going to do much for you. This problem, shelter, whatever passion you may have in life is going to steal that passion out of you. If you have a boyfriend and you love your boyfriend, but your mom is sick and she lives in Nebraska and you need to go and take care of her, the truth is your relationship is going to suffer. You being away for 6 months is not going to be healthy for your relationship. These are just facts of life. So if you want to become spiritual, for those of you in this class, or if you want to make sure that your spiritual questions have significance and value and meaning and depth, these three areas of life, food, shelter, and clothing, they need to be in place. Okay? If this is a little difficult to grasp, think of it this way. If you like someone and you want to spend a lot of time with them, okay, but you got no money and you got 3 jobs and you're carrying 21 units, the truth is, in as much as you fantasize about being with this person, your physical life does not allow for that. Okay? And the only way anyone can like you is when you have enough time to waste with them. If you don't waste time, you don't create stories. No stories, no glue. No glue, no relationship. So wasting time is important. Okay. Now, once you have food, shelter, clothing, the next thing you need is, inside this shelter, you need parents. What is it that parents give you? They give you love. They also give you discipline. But they also give you safety. And in safety, you know what you have? You have faith. You have trust. You have routine. You know what stability looks like. And you know what that means? It means your soul, if you have any, it's intact. You don't have any cracks on the inside. Which means if you like Xanthony, you don't have much of a difficulty trusting him. Because your parents gave you that. If you don't have this, what you have is a house that will never be a home. That when someone knocks on the door, you always look through the keyhole. Who is this? I don't know them. I'm not going to open the door. So your receptivity is not going to be as fluid. Okay? Yeah.
What if you don't have parents per se to do that?
What do you mean?
Like, my mother up and left for Colorado, right?
Okay.
And so, since I was 16, I've been on my own, and I would say that, honestly, since that happened, I've become more spiritual and more capable of feeling emotions because that part of me is gone. That part that was such a big cloud in my life is no longer there.
I am not the right person for that question. And the reason is, I'm usually dark. Like, dark. So, I could unpack, your history a little bit, but it wouldn't be the right thing for me to do. I think where you...
I make peace with it?
Yeah.
With my mother?
What?
You said her mother went to Colorado. She gone. She in her life since she was 16. Did you make peace with
I make peace with it?
her? Did you forgive her?
I wouldn't say I forgave her. I don't think I'll ever forgive her. I think forgiving someone is like,
No, because I left my mom out for 14 years.
I think that it's not about forgiving per se, as coping with the idea that it was her decision to be made, and she realized in the time that, our relationship wasn't functional. She wasn't making it better. She isn't emotionally mature to get her child, like we were saying earlier. And I think it's like almost taking grace of that.
So, remember, the question was about how does one become spiritual? In as much as this conversation is really interesting, it's really not. Emotions are really, really complicated. They're very layered. Human relationships are also enormously complex, especially mothers and daughters. Maybe we can devote a class time just unpacking all of that. Approaching this stuff superficially usually doesn't work for me. So with your permission, if we could just continue with this. Any questions or comments before we continue with this? Veronica?
Yes, so going back to, talking about like relationships and things, and kind of waiting to like get to know a person. Like, you know how they have the shows now? Do you think that they
have shows?
of like,
Shows? What shows?
like you don't know the person that you're marrying?
Oh, like blind marriage or whatever.
Love is blind. Yeah. And so they don't know their spouses, and then they meet them, and then a lot of them work out, and then a lot of them get to know these people or their mate, the person that they're matched with, and then they hate them. So I guess my question is, do you really think that that's a valid way of, or which way is better? To not know someone and getting to know them without the sex, or for like being in a relationship with the person and then, like, which way is backwards? Because
I feel like this is Dr. Phil show.
Well, we're even taught historically, like, you're supposed to like wait for sex until marriage, and you know, but nowadays you don't really see that happening. You see people, you know, intermingling and then getting married.
When I was 11, about 50 years ago, my parents one day put me on a plane, Lufthansa, and I go to India. But in my culture 50 years ago, we didn't have concepts like abandonment or love. And so when I stayed in India for the next 2 years, no one talked to me about my parents not loving me, or they betrayed me, or I was abandoned. Loneliness did not exist. Depression doesn't. We didn't have the word or the concept. I've had other friends who came from certain parts of Africa, and instead of going to India, they came to America. And when they told their story, after class, they took them to the counselor's office. And at the age of 13, they were introduced to the concepts of loneliness, betrayal, no love, depression. And that person was on medication for many, many, many years, and they never healed. And the point I'm trying to make is, I think every culture creates its own diseases, and then it also creates its own remedies. If you really look at the Quran, if you look at the New Testament, the Old Testament, not so much the old one, the new one, I wouldn't know what Jesus would say about the internet. And I wouldn't know what Jesus would say about sex before marriage. And the point I'm trying to make is, in 21st century, we have issues that human beings have never dealt with. You know, you have women now having social status and financial power that they didn't have for many, many thousands of years. You have men who have been in the dominant position in society for the longest time in our history. And now that is being challenged, which means that now you're entering worlds that you've never been in before. You know, sex before marriage, it's about 56 years. Consider, for example, contraceptives. So, which means that your relationship with sex is much more casual now. The relationship with pregnancy is much casual now. So things that were looked upon very seriously are not as serious anymore. Add to the fact that during the Depression era, finding a loaf of bread was very, very tough. Now you have truckloads of bread, which means that you could be as wasteful as you want to be. It doesn't really matter, okay? Money is not as valued anymore. If you replace that with people, you have lots of options now. You know, one of the things that someone like Kierkegaard had argued around the 19th century is that the problem with Don Giovanni is that sex for him is no longer as meaningful. He just does it to remove boredom and remove loneliness from himself. And that's the condition of the 21st century. Now, your question is about relationships, about marriage. Arranged marriages no longer work because people are no longer the way they used to be. Now you also have diversity inclusion, which means the following. If I was to fall in love with you, for example, you're an American, I'm Persian. We come from two very, very different backgrounds. And for these two cultures to mesh and mesh well, it takes many, many, many hundreds, if not thousands of years. There's a story told to us by Aristophanes or Plato later on. It's about cutting an apple with a dull knife. If you've never cut an apple with a dull knife, go home and cut it. And you realize that when the apple is cut with a dull knife, you have two very rough edges. Now, if you put them back together, it's not like they came from the same place. They're two very, very different apples. At least it feels like, okay? What you need to do is you need to grind them against one another for a long, long time until the edges become smooth. You and I come from very, very different backgrounds and different generations with different passions and desires. 100 years ago, you lived in a village and I lived in the same village. Our parents went to the same church. We believed in the same thing. Everything about us, for the most part, very much the same. Which meant that if I was to marry you, we would believe in the same thing. Our morality would be the same. Our pleasure categories would be the same. Everything about us would be the same. The only difficulty was raising kids. That's it. And even that wouldn't be a problem because you have your parents around. You have grandparents around. You have aunts and uncles and neighbors. Okay? You don't have any of that anymore. I don't believe in the things you believe in. Okay? I don't come from the same culture. Your rights and wrongs are very different. Our taste in music is different. Taste in food is different. You've gone through certain modes of experience that I don't even understand. I've gone through certain things that you don't even understand. And you're saying that now you want to marry me without getting to know me? Or even if you were to know me, how much of me do I actually know that I can present to you? I mean, look, people go to therapists at the age of 60 or 70, being married for 30, 40 years, going through all these ups and downs. The point is getting to know someone is really, really tough. In fact, it's really dangerous getting to know them these days. In a culture, again, such as this, where depression is about 60%, maybe it's best not to get to know people. You're also talking about an institution that has the bankruptcy rate of 70%, marriage. You would never invest your savings into a business that's going down. I mean, that's what marriage is, right? Our problem is you look at your grandparents who were married for 60 years, and that is what you want. They can sit at the same table. He reads his paper, she reads her paper, or maybe he talks on the phone. And they live a very separate but communal life. And they work things out for the past 60 years. And you want that. You like the stability. There is something profoundly beautiful about that sort of a life. But that's not the way 21st century people work anymore. Your grandparents were not exposed to the certain forces that exist in our lives. For the most part, relationships these days, for me, I think, it's really just luck. And some brains, but mostly luck. And abstinence is no good. It's no good because it goes against your organism. Stanley? Yeah.
Talk about how relationships spend time, but this how a relationship values you get that relationship. This is one person talking about this conflict.
Stanley, the last part, I just didn't get.
This is about how different religion values one another.
You said religious values?
Yeah.
I don't know if these days it matters. Look, yeah, I don't know. I don't know because I don't think that if you live in a culture that doesn't have very many religious elements in it, it's not going to impact people that much. Look, if I like someone and they happen to be an atheist, so what? Doesn't matter. Okay, so if you're a woman, I'm a man, and I happen to be of a Jewish tradition, but you happen to be an agnostic, for example, you need to become a Jew. Because it goes through the woman's line. So if you refuse to convert, there's a good chance, depending on how religious I am, and then our marriage is not going to go very well. Unless we just decide not to have children. Is that true? Something like that? Yeah.
It all sounds so wild.
Wild?
I'm married. I've been divorced. I have a big job, a house in the hills. And, it's like, I tell younger kids, you have to get married. They're like, oh, sex before marriage? So, seems pretty easy. I don't have time for spirituality. I've got a hustle.
No, look.
Here's a hustle.
Going back to Evan's question, food, shelter, clothing, relationships, job, rent, they occupy about 95 to 99% of your brain space. You don't have time for anything else. The spiritual part comes about when most of the things that you want in life you have, and for some strange reason they no longer speak to you. That you have the wife is no longer enough, you have the job is no longer enough, and for most of us it takes about 20, 30, 40 years to get all of those things and to spend enough time with those things to realize, yeah, I don't think it's enough for me anymore. I want other things. The problem with coming to realize that none of those things are nourishing you if you've been married for about 40 years, you refer to yourself as a husband, as a wife, as a mother, as a father. And when your wife divorces you, you have no idea who you are anymore. And there's a good amount of sadness and depression and loneliness and conflict and doubt you go through. If you're lucky to overcome that, if I was to give you, say, an example from the New Testament, I would say the following. If you chart the life of someone like Jesus, right? We're talking about 2,000 years ago. No internet, no divorces, no prostitution out in the open. Okay, women are very modest, men are very modest. And you realize that this is a guy that looks at the Jewish tradition and says, it doesn't nourish me. He looks at his parents and he says, that doesn't nourish me. They have a home. You're talking about 2,000 years ago. People are not very ambitious. You're born in a village and you die in that village. Okay, no one travels because traveling requires money. And no one has money. And you have a guy who says, everything under the sun that relates to my physical life, I'm not interested. So there are lots of things for you to have become saturated with. Children, companion, money, life down here, nothing. And then you go on this quest. Now the problem with the spiritual life is you actually don't know what you're questing. You don't know what you're looking for. If you've ever been in a long-term relationship or short-term, and all of a sudden your companion looks at you and says, I'm just not happy. The first thing you ask is, but what are you looking for? And you realize that she doesn't really know or he doesn't know. And that's our dilemma, that we don't really know what we're looking for. We know what we don't like. We just don't know what we like. And that's the difficulty. So when you get to graduate to a point where you say, I am going to go on the spiritual course, and someone says, well, what does that mean? You say, I don't really know. All I know is that marriage is not doing it, fatherhood is not doing it, job is not doing it, cars are not doing it, drinking is not doing it, porn is not doing it, sex, nothing is doing it. I don't know what I'm looking for. All I know is that I'm not happy. And that's a really, really tough place to be, because by the time you get there, there's a good chance that 99.9% of the books out there are useless for you. talks are useless to you. Lots of things become useless. In other words, your spirit just rejects everything. And yeah, I would put this on the board, but I don't really want to. Yeah.
Do you think that we can ever truly know ourselves if we can't?
There is a part of me, a 62-year-old man, that is historical. In other words, I can go back in time and tell you some of the things I remember doing in the past 62 years of my life. I can give you that knowledge. All the things I have done, they have created for me a set of emotions. I have access to some of them. Not all of them, some of them. Some of the emotions that live inside me sometimes force me to do things I don't really understand. I can give you access to those things as well, but not to the things I don't understand. I also come from a culture that's about 4,000 years old, and that culture has impacted me in ways I'm not aware of and I don't understand. And I can give you things that I myself don't have awareness of. But I know that they impact me. I have lived in America for 50 years almost, outside of my own country. There are things about this culture I just don't get and I just don't like. And if you were to ask me why, I said, well, it doesn't go well with my culture. And he said, well, you only lived in that culture for 11 years. That may be so, but for some strange reason, it's just hardwired inside me. Okay? So, and I have thoughts. And if I was to share with you those thoughts, it'd be very difficult for me to explain to you how I came upon them. And then there is a spiritual part of me that I really don't have the power, the language, or the emotions, or the intellect to convey that. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is you can only have access to maybe 5% of who and what I am. The 95%, I know about 40% of that myself, the rest remain a mystery. Look, I think one of the reasons why most people had a very successful marriage for the longest time in our history, this idea of getting to know myself and getting to know my companion, it just didn't exist. You never saw your wife, or if you saw your wife, it was only for a few hours after work. Then you take care of the kids. The idea of me, you sitting down and trying to get to know each other, it just doesn't exist. Add to the fact that people didn't know how to read. I mean, reading is relatively new, maybe 100 years old for the common masses. College system, it's only about 60 years old, 70 years old, that's it. You know, this idea of getting to know yourself requires introspection, going inside yourself, trying to figure out why you think the way you do, why you feel the way you do. That's not common. We didn't do this for the longest time in our history. Once in a while, you find people like a Jesus Christ, the kingdom of God lives inside you. Go figure that out. You know, once in a while, you get a Sigmund Freud. Consider the superego and the ego and the id. You don't get those things. So this idea of getting to know myself, it's really about, if I was to be very generous, about 200 years old. It's new. The dangerousness of getting to know yourself is you're going to walk into a lot of dark spots. And then you're going to find yourself in a good amount of doubt about who and what you are. Let me give you an example. Do you have kids? You don't have kids ever? Don't try it, but just in case you do later on. The way the current climate is moving, your 8-year-old is going to come home one day, maybe much younger, maybe 5 by the time you have children. Okay. You're not yet a parent, so some of the concerns that parents have don't really live inside you just yet. They're going to come home and they're going to say, I'm going to change my pronoun. Okay? Now look, for the longest time in our history, you want to know who you are, you pull down your pants and there it is. You want to know what sort of an animal you are. You once lived in the Garden of Eden, you've been expelled from it. Life down here is not a place of joy or happiness. It's to save your soul. Okay? Then you want to figure out why you're no longer a he or a she, but a they. And how old is your brain? 5, maybe 6 years old. You're going to a place that not even adults can comprehend. I mean, that's contemplation, introspection, reflection at an age where you don't even have the tools. If I want to build a house, I need nail guns. I need 2x4s. I need concrete. I need rebars. I need shingles. I need a lot of information. You're 5, you're 6, and you're going to a place where you're going to encounter a good amount of confusion. How are you going to survive it? Now add to it the medication given to 4 and 5-year-olds. 45% of kids under the age of 10 are medicated. That's a horrifying place to be as parents and as children. Now, this idea of getting to know yourself, what part of yourself? The physical part, the emotional part, the intellectual part, the psychological part filled with trauma? And forget the spiritual, that's like for very, very advanced people. You know, simple people are easy to get along with. You don't want to get together with a philosopher or someone who thinks deeply or someone who's been damaged because of certain events in life. Because what damage does, it rattles you, has a lot of cracks, and every crack creates its own unique set of pain. And pain allows you to put life on pause and sit back and find a remedy for it. If you hang out with someone who has a lot of cracks on the inside, it means that they have done a lot of good amount of reflection. And reflection creates doubts. It doesn't mean you can't have great conversations. You can have wonderful conversations, but their mood is usually dark and reflective. It puts a heavy weight on life. Now, you may have the capacity for that. You may not have. Only time will tell. Yeah.
Is it possible to get rid of that?
What?
That heavy weight on that?
The greatest sin that you could ever commit is reflection. It's a cross you have to carry. Look, imagine I'm your boyfriend. And imagine one day you read in my journal that I was with Abraham. You know. How will you forget that? Every time I pick up my phone and you see me texting, are you going to doubt? Absolutely. Every time I go to Home Depot and I say I'll be back in 10 minutes, but that 10 minutes turns into 45 minutes, what are you going to do? Now, if that is the cross you have to carry, then you have to be patient with all the weight that is imposed upon you. And there's a good chance you'll break. If you have a support system, in other words, if there are some serious issues inside you, and I don't mean them in a negative way, if you have a boyfriend with whom you can have stretches of conversation, you're very, very, very lucky because you have a sounding board. If on the other hand, you have all these emotions, but there are no ears to speak into, then you're going to suffer from loneliness. And there is only so much loneliness you can carry before that loneliness turns into depression. And there is only so much depression you can carry before it turns chronic. And once you become chronically depressed, it lives inside your soul and it can't be yanked out. It's impossible. You're diseased for life. And by disease, I don't mean negative again. You know, you could be an Angela Davis or a Malcolm X or a Jesus Christ. You can become very creative with the reflective aspect. But you just need to choose your company very carefully, that's all. Yeah, Tammy.
How necessary our principles for life?
I think all of us have principles until life throws us an event, that the foundation gets cracked. I mean, look, I don't like to steal, but if I see my kids starving, I will steal. I don't like to hurt other people, but if it's my life or their life, I will take their life. Again, if you watch this movie, Rambo, not the last one, but I think number 4, number 5, where you have Christians going to him saying, we want to help these people. And the first thing he asks is, do you have guns? And they say, no, we have Bibles. That's not going to go. Fuck off. That's what he says in the movie. I'm quoting. And the very Christian who was against murder killed someone. And so the point is, I think when you happen to find yourself in a safe environment, principles are good, morals are good, being religious is good, all those things are good. But when things get tough, then you become like a Robin Hood. You ask God for help. It's a one-way street. You scream and there is no screaming back. You don't get any messages. Then you say, you know what? It seems like I got to do things my own way. And then you do it. One of the things about the spiritual quest is that because most of our principles and moral codes are socially manufactured or through our families, your teacher will have no choice but to destroy all of them. Because what your teacher wants to do is your teacher wants to give you his or her own moral codes. So if you encounter, for example, Jesus in the New Testament, he doesn't like the way his students have turned out because of social conditioning, religious conditioning, and familial conditioning. He wants them to be completely blank so he could reprogram them, So we encounter moments where our principles no longer work, but thankfully those moments pass by very, very quickly. Carolina, anything?
When people would look at where Neanderthals lived and stuff, and old early humans, they saw a lot of ritualistic bearings and stuff like that, especially with the Neanderthals decorating the body and stuff like that. I guess I just kind of have the question of how instinctual are rituals within us, or are now the rituals that we have having classroom based on how we created, how many constructs we have in life, stuff like that. Just rituals, how are rituals presented, how they influence religion.
I think if you want to have a romantic night out, for example, you clean your house, you light some candles, you buy some flowers, that's the ritual that you do. When it comes to the end of life rituals, i.e. death, there is the element of being forgotten, which is frightening. In other words, it's something we talked about in the last class, which was my father is 92, 93. Okay? We have a really, really good relationship. And so sometimes when him and I talk about death, one of the things that he asks is, how do you keep the memories alive of someone you love but they are no longer around? And you realize, well, you have no choice but to create rituals, okay? Like having lots of pictures. These days, whenever I go to Roseville to visit them, I take a lot of pictures and videos from my father. And he thinks I'm actually doing it because he looks good or because he's saying something interesting. But the truth is, I know that at this age, anything can happen at any time. Just in case he goes away, the ritual would be me and my family sitting once in a while with my wife and kids and just looking at my father and how he said what he said, how he behaved, one of those things. Now, if your culture has not been contaminated by technology, what you have is very, very barbaric, and by barbaric, I mean old school rituals. So my sister-in-law passed away couple weeks ago. What usually happens is she's from Eritrea, a certain part of Africa. My wife is. And so you have 100 people going to the Ethiopian church on Martin Luther King Jr. They sit, and these are all women dressed in a certain way. The family sits in the front, okay, the guest just looking at the family. Everybody pays a certain amount of money for the burial service. Everybody makes food, and they have to make food for the next 40 days. Because the culture has come to realize that, well, the relationship between parents and kids are very, very intimate. They've created a lot of stories, and it's a devastating reality, death, especially when a mother has to see a daughter die. Okay? So how do you make sure that the mother survives this tragedy? You make sure they're never alone. So for the past 5,000 years, they keep adding on to this tradition. You know, if there is no church, you go to their house. You make sure this woman is never alone. If they're alone, you call them. When you're there, you read the Bible together. They have their own Ethiopian Bible. And then you go to the cemetery, and there is a certain rituals that you take to the cemetery. And you realize it gives us a place of comfort, psychological comfort, okay, as long as these rituals are in place. Now, if I was to tell you something about, for example, my own family, my mother and my father are the only people who do Muslim prayer. And so whenever we get together, we say, Mom, Dad, you know, when you guys die, kids will never again see two people praying 5 times a day. That ritual will be gone. And once the ritual goes away, there goes a certain piece of comfort that you need in times of difficulties in life. When you remove that ritual, it means that when you're devastated, you have one less thing that you can fall and have a cushion underneath you. You know, it's like you have a father, you have a mother, you have a brother like me, okay? Your mom dies, your dad dies, and whenever your life goes into some difficulty, you go to your mom, she comforts you, you go to your dad, he comforts you, you come to me. Your mom dies, there's still your dad, and there's still your brother. Your dad dies, there's still your brother. If I die, then you're on your own. And that's devastating. And that's what rituals do. They give you enough comfort just in case you're devastated, they embrace you. In the absence of that, you have loneliness, and then you have depression. And if the depression becomes, the problem with depression is, after a while, no one can reach you. You know, it's what Jean-Jacques Rousseau around the 17th or 16th century had considered, being lonely in a crowd. So, given the fact that you're not from this culture, you know, or you have links to other cultures that have more age and depth, it's not a bad thing for you to go back in time and retrieve some of the things and practice them day in and day out until they become part of your life. So when you bring a man or a woman into your life and you bring children to your life, you give them rituals. You may be interested in a book that was written by a student of Sigmund Freud. His name is Rollo May, and the book is called The Cry for Myth. There was a time you looked at the sun and you saw God. Now you look at the sun, you just see a hot rock. That's all. If you see God, you know He's watching over you. And if you want to make a promise, the first thing you do is you look at the sun and then you make your promise. Remove that symbol. The sun is just the sun, which means that next time you want to make a promise, it's just words, and you can break them at any time, and there is no watcher over you. I know, Stanley, I know. Any other questions or comments before we? Yeah.
How does spiritual tradition explain the nature of consciousness? You see the source of life.
Say again.
How does spiritual tradition explain the nature of consciousness? As a source of life.
It's good to see you, Alexis. You're good, healthy? It's good to see you. I don't really know how to answer that question except the following, Stanley. When I was 18, I wanted to be a tennis pro, and I wanted to be a soccer pro. I ran into this man, his name was Hussein. For the next 10 years, he became my teacher. He made me lose interest in everything. And I remember one day I went out on a date at the car wash. We had this customer, this young woman. She said, do you want to go have Chinese food? So we went to Chopsticks in Roseville. We had some Chinese food. When the date ended, she leaned over and kissed me. But I was not supposed to be intimate with anyone. So he ruined everything that was fun. I don't know if that does anything for you. It doesn't even do anything for me as I'm saying it. Have anything? No, go ahead.
Just like on your definition of spirituality, so do you consider it something that it's something that you seek or achieve? It's not something that's just kind of inherent to our experience?
I think we are creatures that seek beauty in things physical. I mean, I like this room to look good, man, to feel good. I mean, look at it. It's junky. I mean, I don't want it to be like a church. I don't want crosses everywhere. I just want it to be clean. Yeah. Why? Because it's nice to be around things that are beautiful. It's nice to see someone who's pushed into the realm of anger to be able to control their emotions, you know? And even though they've been pushed into a realm that's dark and negative, still they come out smiling. It's beautiful to see that. I like when someone asks a question, you can sit back and listen to this person speak of it so articulately, so clearly, that inspires you. It's beautiful. It's wonderful to sit next to someone and they say nothing. There's just something about their physical presence that it just calms you. Something washes over you and you don't know what that is, but it's beautiful. So we are the sort of animals. I mean, it's like you go to Barney's and you want to get a burger. You put it in your mouth and your taste buds says, fuck, that's disgusting. You don't need to be religious for that. Your taste buds. I mean, there is something about our organism that says, you know what, it's just nice to be around things that are attractive. Okay. So some people are born to be unhappy with anything and everything physical. How that happens, I don't really know. You know, it's like the story of Jesus. They were told from a very, very young age, Mary and Joseph, that listen, you're going to have a kid, and this kid is going to be a troublemaker. You know, he's not going to like to get married. He doesn't like a big house. He doesn't like kids. He's just on a spiritual quest. So this kid is condemned. Okay. Then you have another group of people, kind of like Moses. They walk into life and they are part of life. They like big houses. They like to be a pharaoh. They like power. And at a certain point, something about their life changes. They begin to understand something about their life just clicks. A mom dies, a dad dies, they get cancer, they lose a house, they lose a car, they have a child that gets cancer and dies. And all of a sudden they say, you know what? There has to be a meaning to life. You know, and we don't really know how people break. You know, some people are devastated day after day after day and they never break. And some people are devastated for one simple thing and all of a sudden their life is turned upside down. Okay. Since time is short, I'll give it to you this way. There is the genitalia area, symbolic for immediate passions. Okay? And by that I mean, you don't have patience to go to 50 years of school to get a PhD. You want something to be fun right now and right there. You want to smoke, you want to drink, you want to have sex, you want to go to a party, you want to drive a car. You can get them in like 10, 20, 30 minutes. And then you get to the abdomen area. And you need to have this. You know, kids want to have fun, man. Pleasure is good. You know, and then you get to the abdomen area. That's a place of power. You guys are in school, which means if you want to like get pleasure by drinking, you can get it in 10 minutes. If you want to get a pleasure that's the outcome of a degree, that's about 2 years of patience. And that requires sacrifice. You know, it's like being in a long-term relationship, the way Magnolia is. I've been with this guy for 4 years. It doesn't mean other people are not interesting, but when I think of it, I'd rather sacrifice those momentary pleasures to keep my relationship intact. Okay. So as you get to the abdomen, you sacrifice more, you understand more. Just in case you have a lot of power, you have a lot of money, you go to school, you get a job, you get a paycheck. If you don't graduate from the genitalia area, the immediate pleasures, in a mature way, whatever money you get from the abdomen, you'll spend it on the genitalia. Okay? Okay. Then you get to the heart area. For the first time, you say, you know what? I want to be in healthy relationships. I don't want to sleep around. I want to get married. I want to buy a house. I want to have children. I want to help the homeless. You become a bit more of a social activist. Now, what you have done is you have fulfilled this area, the pleasure area. Okay. You have also have power, education, money. You also have healthy, bona fide relationships. At a certain time, you say, you know what? It's not enough. Now you go here. The crown of the head, the place of the spirit, where God descends. When you get to this area, it means that this is no longer enough. This is no longer enough. This is no longer enough. For the first time, you realize you're a solitary human being on a quest that you're not unsure of. You're not sure of. You're on your own. Your wife will try to reach you, unable. Your kids will try to reach you, unable. You may want to go back into these three areas. They won't be fun. And that's when your spiritual quest begins. Anyways, I've taken too much of your time. Thank you. Stay safe. Have a nice Thanksgiving. Enjoy your parents, your friends.
Thank you.
Thank you.